My name is Caroline Hayes, and until last winter, I thought I had it all. I was 38, a published novelist with 5 bestsellers and a cozy brownstone tucked between Lexington and 72nd in Manhattan. My life had a rhythm slow coffee in the morning, a quiet writing hour by the fireplace and evenings with my husband David Hayes, a financial advisor with a velvet voice that could melt bad news into background noise. He used to call me Caro, soft and low like a lullaby, and every morning he kissed my forehead like a promise. I thought I was living in a fairy tale. Then one night, everything shifted. I woke up at 12:11 a.m. The clock's red numbers burned into the dark. David wasn't in bed. That wasn't unusual. I figured he was down in his home office getting a glass of water, or maybe checking on a late email. I turned over meaning to drift back to sleep. Then I heard his voice. It was muffled, but serious, sharper than I'd ever heard it. I sat up. My heart picked up pace. "She doesn't suspect a thing," he said. The words like ice dropped down my spine. I climbed out of bed, slowly bare feet on hardwood, and padded toward the hallway. His office door was cracked light, slipping out into the dim hall. I pressed myself against the wall, breath shallow. "Almost done. Just need the last batch moved," he continued. I didn't hear who he was speaking to. I didn't need to. I tiptoed back to bed and lay stiff under the blanket. A few minutes later, David returned, climbing in beside me like nothing had happened. He wrapped his arm around me. I stayed still. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling until dawn painted light against the walls, my body numb, my mind racing. David was hiding something. And I had a sinking feeling I was the thing being hidden from. By morning, I was moving like a ghost. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the espresso machine, fingers trembling. David was still asleep upstairs. I don't know what made me do it, but I reached for my phone and opened the banking app. My breath caught. $750 here. $1, $200 there. $500, $2. 000, $1, 900. Nothing massive individually, but over 3 months, they stacked up like bricks, building a wall of lies. Hidden transactions. Strange investment names I'd never seen. I felt the blood drain from my face. Then a voice behind me. Checking the account this early, I jumped. David stood in the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck like he'd just woken up. "Just curious," I said, willing my voice to stay even. "Some of these look unfamiliar." He poured coffee and gave a tight smile. "Oh, just a few private investments. I must have forgotten to mention them." He sipped, didn't look at me, and I knew right then that he was lying. But I said nothing. I smiled back and nodded as if I believed him. That was the moment something inside me hardened. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was colder, sharper. Something that didn't blink. That night I noticed more. He was glued to his phone, stepping out for calls, locking his screen when I came near. "What's going on?" I asked once. "Just work." But I was worried. And that worry was turning into resolve. 2 months later, the breakup came. David had just finished. "Shower time," he announced, stretching. Normally, his phone was like it was glued to his hand. But tonight, he left it on the table. I waited. 10 seconds, 30. Upstairs. I grabbed it. It was unlocked. English dozens of phone texts. Then, one number with no contact name. The latest message made my stomach twist. "Send her the Ilium files. Just make sure she stays in the dark." "Almost done. Ilium files," I whispered. Her was I, her my. Throat tightened. I scrolled back through the conversation, vague, cold phrases. Nothing directly incriminating, but everything about it felt off. Corporate. Clinical. I placed the phone back exactly how he left it. Then I walked to the sink and ran cold water over my wrists, trying to keep my pulse down. Later, as he got into bed beside me, he kissed my cheek. You okay, Caro? I nodded. Just tired. Inside, I was screaming, but he thought I was still asleep. Let him believe it. That was his mistake. The next morning, David left early, claiming he had a client breakfast on the Upper East Side. He kissed me goodbye briefly, and distracted, then disappeared out the door with his briefcase and phone in hand. As soon as the elevator doors shut, I exhaled. My hands were shaking. I walked back to the kitchen and sat at the marble counterphone in hand, staring at the banking app again. I scrolled until my eyes blurred. I had never looked at our finances before. That had always been his territory. He handled the bills, the portfolios, even my book royalties. I thought that was normal. We were a team, right? But now, with every transaction I reviewed, I realized I hadn't just handed over responsibility, I had handed over control. And that mistake might cost me everything. That afternoon, I made a call I'd never imagined making. I dialed Elizabeth Monroe, my old college roommate. Liz was no longer the girl who snuck mini wine bottles into dorm movie nights. She was now a highly respected estate attorney in Connecticut, with her firm and a reputation for being ruthless when it came to financial protection. Caroline. Her voice came through warm but alert. It's been forever. I need help, I said, voice low and tight. I think my husband is planning something. I found strange transactions. Messages. It's bad, Liz. She didn't hesitate. How bad? We're talking about close to 500 million, I whispered. There was a pause. Okay, she said, her voice turning professional. You're going to send me every document you have. We need to move your assets now. Caroline, if he's preparing to make a legal move, he's already ahead. I swallowed. I felt like the walls were closing in. Can we do this? We have to, she said. You built your career, your money, your name. He doesn't get to take any of that. For the next 3 days, we worked around the clock. I canceled lunch meetings, told friends I had deadlines. I barely slept. Liz assembled a full legal team, a trust specialist, an accountant, and a private investigator. We created an irrevocable trust, moved the deed to the brownstone under its name, froze the accounts David had access to, and rerouted my book royalty payments directly into the trust. It felt like turning off a leaking pipe right before the water burst through the walls. On the third evening, David returned home, carrying takeout from our favorite Thai place, smiling like nothing had changed. Thought we'd do curry night, he said, setting the bag on the counter. Like old times. I played along. I smiled, opened the containers, and poured wine. He had no idea that while he was at work, I had dismantled his plan piece by piece. The fortress was built. The money moved. My name protected. I waited. 4 days later, he made his move. It was a Friday. He came home earlier than usual, dressed in one of his custom-tailored navy suits. He didn't kiss my cheek this time. Instead, he sat at the dining table and opened his briefcase. We need to talk, he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. I opened it slowly. Divorce papers. I think it's for the best, he said, voice smooth. We've grown apart. No need to make things more painful. I looked up at him. His eyes didn't flicker. He had practiced this. I slid the folder back toward him. There's something you should know before we go any further. His brow furrowed. What I leaned in just slightly. Calm, clear. I've already moved everything. His face paled. What do you mean? The apartment, the accounts, the royalties, all of it. It's under a trust now, legally protected. You can't touch a dime. His jaw clenched. You can't do that. I already did. He stared at me, blinking, calculating. You were right about one thing, I added. Life is unpredictable. He pushed back from the table, eyes dark. We'll see each other in court. I nodded, stood. Go ahead. Try. He stormed out. I waited until the front door clicked shut before I let myself breathe. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood in the quiet, wrapped in stillness. But the storm wasn't over. 3 days later, I began to notice the whispers. At my publishing agency, coworkers avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when I walked by. I caught sidelong glances, uneasy silence. My assistant Rachel finally came into my office, pale and wide-eyed, holding a printed page. "I think you need to see this." It was a screenshot of a post on an anonymous legal forum. "CFO hides funds during divorce embezzlement in progress." The body of the post accused an unnamed executive of hiding company money to protect personal wealth during a divorce. And in the comments, I know who it is. Caroline Hayes. Look into her. I felt sick. My heart slammed against my ribs. He did this, I thought. David. Rachel swallowed. If this spreads, it could destroy my name, I whispered. That night, I was in Liz's office again. "He's trying to ruin me," I said, breathless shaking. "This isn't just personal anymore. He's attacking my career." Liz narrowed her eyes. "He's trying to force you into a settlement. It's scare tactics. He wants you afraid." I shook my head. "I'm not backing down." She gave a tight nod. "First step, cease. Next step, we sue him for defamation if he dares to escalate." But David wasn't done escalating. 3 days later, Liz called me into her office again. She looked grim. "He filed a lawsuit," she said as I walked in. "He's accusing you of financial fraud, claiming you illegally moved marital assets." I dropped into the chair across from her. "He can't be serious." "He is. And he has a co-plaintiff." She slid a file across the desk. The name on it, Elliot Romero. It hit me like a punch. Ilium. The files. The text message. I looked at Liz. "Who is he, known scammer?" "No convictions yet, but he's left a trail of forgery and fake shell companies all over the Northeast." I opened the folder. It was filled with falsified transaction histories, fake bank signatures, even one attempting to replicate mine. "These aren't real," I said, voice rising. "These are fakes." "We know," Liz said calmly. "Now we prove it." I sat in Liz's office, that thick file of lies spread open between us. Every page I turned twisted my stomach tighter. The numbers didn't make sense. The dates were wrong. Some entries showed transactions on days I was at book signings thousands of miles away. Others listed accounts I had never opened, let alone touched. And the signatures, some even tried to mimic my handwriting. Almost convincing. But not quite. "They're trying to bury me in paperwork," I said, through gritted teeth. "Smother me in fake evidence until I can't breathe." Liz didn't flinch. She picked up her phone. "Then we build oxygen." Within 24 hours, she brought in a forensic finance expert, a man named Dr. Nathan Clark, who looked like he belonged more in a lab than a courtroom, wire-rimmed glasses, gray hair in a ponytail, and a laser-focused stare that seemed to pierce the paper itself. He studied the documents for 10 minutes without saying a word. Then finally, he looked up. "These aren't just fake," he said. "They're clumsy." I blinked. Clumsy, bad digital trails. Transaction timestamps that don't align with banking logs. Signature inconsistencies. And most importantly, no institutional origin. These aren't copies of real documents. They're replicas made from scratch. A thread of hope tugged at the edges of my fear. "We can prove it," I asked. "We can bury it," he said. And so we began. For the next 7 days, I barely left Liz's office. We pulled every financial statement I'd ever signed, every email, confirming a transaction, every deposit from every book deal. Nathan cross-verified all of it against the supposed evidence in David's lawsuit. It became an obsession. I didn't eat much. Didn't sleep more than an hour or two a night. I drank cold coffee and walked laps around the office floor to keep from losing my mind. Liz stayed with me every night. Her staff brought in food. Her paralegal Samantha offered quiet support. No one said it, but we were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my name. My life's work. The reputation I'd spent 2 decades building. Every time I thought I couldn't go any further, I remembered David's smug face across the table when he handed me those divorce papers. I remembered how confident he looked, and it gave me fuel. By the end of the week, Nathan had assembled a bulletproof digital trail. Every fake transaction had a hole in it. Every page of fake documentation had inconsistencies metadata showing the files were created weeks ago, not when they claimed. The most damning part, they traced several source files directly back to a server tied to Elliot Romero's consulting business. The same Elliot who never showed up to a single court summons. He was a ghost, and David had bet everything on him. We filed our motion to dismiss the lawsuit the next morning, complete with a 300-page forensic rebuttal. And then we waited. The court date was set for a Tuesday morning, just over a month after David filed. The day before, I walked through Central Park for hours. It was early spring. The trees were just starting to bud. I let the wind tangle my hair and tried to remind myself that this time tomorrow, it would all be in the open. I arrived at the courthouse wearing navy blue. Not black, I wasn't mourning. I was fighting. David was already there, sitting across the aisle with his attorney, a sleek woman in heels that clicked too loudly. He didn't look like the David I had married. His face was hollowed. There were shadows under his eyes. His jaw clenched too often. I took my seat beside Liz and folded my hands over the table. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a reputation for having zero patience for theatrics, entered and called the room to order. The hearing began. David's lawyer tried to walk through their evidence, but every time she raised a point, Liz countered it with Nathan's findings. Signatures proven false. Timelines debunked. Transactions are disconnected from my actual accounts. Within 90 minutes, the courtroom shifted. Even the judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Then came the moment Liz had been waiting for. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the false documents were created and uploaded from a server linked to Mr. Romero's business, and Mr. Romero has failed to appear in this courtroom despite multiple notices." She slid an exhibit packet across the bench. The judge flipped through the pages slowly. At last, she looked at David. "Mr. Hayes, do you have anything to say regarding this evidence?" David opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Not a word. The judge sighed. Based on the overwhelming lack of credibility in the plaintiff's claims and the defense's verified financial documentation, this case is dismissed. Furthermore, Mr. Hayes is ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by Miss Ray Tate Hayes during this process. It was over. But the moment didn't feel like a celebration. It felt still. David tried to approach me in the hallway after the ruling. He looked tired, smaller. "You didn't have to do this," he muttered, eyes down. I stared at him. "No, David," I said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." I turned and walked out into the spring air, letting the courthouse doors swing shut behind me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't carrying fear. I was carrying something else. A strange, quiet kind of strength. The days that followed the hearing were quiet, eerily so. No more threatening emails. No more rumors online. Liz's team had the defamatory posts removed, and the cease and desist order kept David from opening his mouth again, at least publicly. But peace didn't feel like I thought it would. It wasn't relief that filled me, it was exhaustion. Deep and bone-heavy. I had spent weeks surviving on adrenaline and sharp focus, and now that it was done, I didn't know what to do with the silence. I tried to return to my writing, opened a blank document, typed a few words, deleted them. I couldn't focus. My mind wandered constantly, circling the same question, like a dog guarding a wound. How long had he been planning this? Had it started before the wedding anniversary trip to Cape Cod, before our last Christmas with his parents in Vermont, before he stood in the front row at my latest book launch and told the reporters how proud he was of me, or had I missed every sign because I wanted to believe the version of him I had built in my head I didn't know? And maybe I never would. I took long walks every morning, often through Riverside Park, where the river shimmered beside the path like something too calm to be real. I avoided the brownstone some afternoons, choosing to work in a small cafe on 83rd where no one knew my name. I started journaling again, not for publication, just for me. And slowly pieces began to come back. Then one morning Liz called. "There's something you should see," she said, her tone tight. I met her in her office 30 minutes later. She handed me a thin file. "He's trying again." Inside were copies of new court filings. David had requested an appeal, arguing that he wasn't given fair discovery time and that the original evidence had been biased. "He's grasping," Liz said. "This won't go far." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "He doesn't want to win. He just wants me tired. He's hoping you'll settle to avoid more court." I closed the file and met her eyes. "He underestimated how far I'll go to protect what's mine." She nodded. "Then let's make sure we end this for good." This time we went on offense. While Liz prepared our rebuttal, Nathan kept digging, and what he found changed everything. Hidden beneath a string of shell company filings, he discovered a set of email threads and document transfers between David Hayes and Elliot Romero dating back 18 months. Long before I heard that midnight phone call. Long before the strange charges started. The emails were clear. Their plan wasn't just about hiding assets. It was about transferring mine into fake business ventures and then folding them, making it look like I'd invested poorly and lost everything naturally. I sat with the printouts in my lap, hands cold. The betrayal cut deeper now. This wasn't just opportunistic. It had been premeditated. He hadn't just drifted away from me. He'd mapped my downfall. Liz filed a counterclaim conspiracy to defraud with intent to damage my professional standing and reputation. We submitted the new evidence, along with a request for an emergency hearing to block further legal action from David's side until the conspiracy case was resolved. It was a bold move. One that made it clear we weren't playing defense anymore. And it worked. Within days, David's legal team responded, not with fire, but with nervous silence. They withdrew the appeal quietly, hoping it would end there. But Liz wasn't done. "This man nearly ruined your name, Caroline," she said. "He weaponized the law against you. He used your trust as a weapon. He doesn't get to walk away." I nodded. "Then we finish this." Our hearing was scheduled for the end of June. This time I didn't walk into court feeling afraid. I wore a white suit, hair tied back. No jewelry except for one small ring, my mother's plain and gold. Liz stood beside me, expression unreadable. David showed up 15 minutes late. No suit, no briefcase. Just a look of someone who had already lost and didn't want to admit it. The judge reviewed the counterclaim for over an hour. Liz presented everything: emails, transfers, phone logs. Nathan confirmed the links between David and Elliot's network. We even had a brief recorded deposition from a tech contractor who had been hired by Elliot to design shell company websites. He admitted under oath that he had been paid by a joint account belonging to Hayes and Romero Holdings, LLC. That was the nail. The court didn't just rule in our favor, it froze all of David's known accounts and referred the case to the state attorney's office for potential criminal conspiracy charges. I didn't smile. David looked up at me once, as if expecting me to gloat. But I didn't give him that. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You chose this." Then I walked out of the courtroom for the last time. A month later, I received a formal notice. David Hayes was under investigation. Elliot Romero had fled the country. The Department of Justice was looking into wire fraud. By then, I was already done trying to make sense of what we were. Done mourning someone who didn't exist. I turned the page. 3 months later, the first lady stepped across the street from the brownstone steps. I watched from my window. Or maybe I was just listening differently. The investigation was ongoing. I received updates possibly even conspiracy to commit cybercrime, but I didn't need revenge. I needed closure, and I found it in the smallest, most unexpected of places. That October, I received a letter. Not an email, not a legal summons, a handwritten letter. It was from Samantha Liz's paralegal. "I thought you might like to know it," said that Elliot Romero has been arrested in Spain. He was caught trying to open a new business account using falsified documents. The authorities contacted the DOJ here in New York. David's name came up again. Things are moving. I folded the letter slowly. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt clean, like something had been washed away. Not forgotten, not forgiven, but rinsed. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I wrote. I sat at my old desk with the windows cracked open to the autumn air, and I began typing. Not a journal, not a rant, but a story. A new novel. One about a woman who loses everything except her spine, except for her voice. About a woman who outsmarts betrayal with grace and rebuilds on her terms. The words came like water. I didn't stop for hours. The next morning, I called my editor. "Clear my calendar," I said. "I've got something," she laughed. "You sound like yourself again." I didn't say anything at first, because I wasn't my old self. I was something sharper now. Weathered, yes, but finished with softness where it no longer belonged. I had shed the woman who waited for people to love her properly. I had become the woman who loved herself enough to walk away. A week later, I filed for a legal name change. Not because I was afraid of David's shadow, but because I didn't want to carry it anymore. I took my mother's maiden name, Caroline Martin. My new book hit shelves in the spring, titled simply The Quiet Kind of War. It debuted at #1. Readers called it raw, elegant, and cutting. I called it mine. And when the press asked what inspired it, I smiled and said I wanted to tell a story about what happens when silence meets strategy. Because that's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't end with screaming or smashed dishes or dramatic exits. Sometimes it ends in the courtroom. Sometimes it ends in a single sentence that closes the door. But most often, it ends in quiet power. And I had found mine. My name is Caroline Martin, once Hayes. And this is the story of how I lost everything I thought I knew and found something far greater: clarity, strength, and truth. For years, I lived in the illusion of a good marriage. David was charming, successful, and attentive, until one quiet night I overheard a conversation that changed everything. That moment unraveled the carefully constructed life we shared. In secret, he had been conspiring with a business associate to drain my $500 million legacy through shell companies, fraud, and betrayal. But I didn't collapse. With the help of my sharp, relentless attorney Liz and my old friend Nathan, I fought back not with rage, but with precision. I protected my fortune through a quiet trust transfer, gathered evidence, and let truth become my weapon. When David's threats escalated into slander and legal warfare, we didn't flinch. We uncovered his web of deceit and exposed him in court, leading not only to the loss of his financial grip on me, but also to the collapse of his credibility and future. That was the battle. But the real journey was internal. I had to mourn the man I thought he was. I had to rebuild the parts of me that had learned to stay quiet for peace. And I had to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be on the other side of it all. I chose strength. I chose stillness. I chose to tell my story, not as revenge, but as reclamation. And in that choice, I found power that no one could touch. I didn't just survive betrayal. I mastered it. And in doing so, I reclaimed the one thing David never understood: how to value me. Caroline Martin, author of The Quiet Kind of War.